welcome to Reed's Rogues Review. And for November here, I am going to kick off with Rogues Review of the Scriers. Believe it or not, this is a group that has recently had a return in the main Amazing Spider-Man book. It's why I'm trying to keep my Rogues reviews to current happenings in the books here. So let's get into actually the story about these characters who actually have been around, hard to believe now, 31, almost 32 years. Very simple. And actually, they came where I was during the Clone Saga when I actually got back into comics in 94. So originally they showed up in Amazing Spider-Man 394. They are really known as the Cabal of the Scryer. Originally, when they showed up, we had with Judas Traveler, who was the new architect and head of Ravencroft, which of course is, in the Marvel universe is kind of the insane asylum for mostly supervillains and other pieces too. And of course, very interesting. Norman Osborn, of course, was the former director of that too, and the Scryer. And they were kind of interesting characters that were on to what they were for the two of them. They were originally created by J.M. DeMatteis and Mark Bagley, who were, of course, the creative team at the time behind Amazing Spider-Man. They were really big, deep in the Clone Saga, especially with the Jackal, and they had been used for the manipulation as well as working during the Clone Saga. Of course, as we found out later, of course, Norman Osborn with things. So they're a very unique set of characters. They're actually based off a cosmic being who existed before the previous universe that Galactus once was too. As he says, I was old when he was still swaddled in clothes. And somewhere around the fall of Atlantis, he was put into a deep hibernation to actually keep on the pieces weakened and decayed and slowly manipulating events through his cult of the Scryer, or the Cabal of the Scryer, the Brotherhood of the Scryer it was known as too. We didn't really get the main Scryer, who it was based off. We had the origins of him in some of the origins and talk about it back in Amazing Spider-Man 417. At the time, that was, of course, done by Tom DeFalco, and at the time, Joe Bennett on the pieces on that too. So we got a lot of the parts on that. We didn't really have a lot about the story of the characters until a couple years later. Key stories of that, of course, is 417, as we know, which was towards the end of the Clone Saga. We actually found out that Scryer wasn't a person. He was actually a group of different areas the Scryers were. And Judas Traveler was actually a mind manipulating mutant, everything else besides these cosmic characters. So there was a lot going on with them that people didn't know. And they kind of cleaned up that origin here just towards the end of the original of the Clone Saga with Ben Reilly. And when Peter kind of started using his own powers with that as well, too. Of course, it was until the 1997 Silver Surfer annual, which I actually still own, where JMD Matthias actually talked about the actual origins of Scryer, where the Silver Surfer discovered him here. And actually, I kind of liked it too, because part of the story took place in Chicago, and it was during when the Silver Surfer had been manipulated by the other and lost his emotions and some other things that were going on at the time too. And they would use these storylines actually for quite a few times, especially when JMD was doing some of his works with Man Thing and a couple other things too. But we didn't really get the story about how Norman Osborn was connected to him and how he used them against and with the Jackal during the Clone Saga until Spider-Man Osborn Journal, which was in early 1997, which is a great one shot. It really talks about the death of Norman Osborn, his rebirth, and what he was doing up in before and during the Clone Saga and what had left to it. But these are three key stories of those ones here as we kind of get round out who the cult of the Scryer was, who the person was, which was the Scryer himself, who of course would be very influential in the Silver Surfer when JM was writing the book. And of course, how Norman got control of them and everything had happened with them in the Origins and Spider-Man Osborn Journal, which we would have a lot of, I think. They were pretty interesting characters too. They made them connected, as the cult of the Scryer was actually a lot of members which Norman had taken over became the cult of the Green Goblin, which was done on the Return of the Green Goblin series by Roger Stern, where the members had done into that. And of course, they led to a split, as Scryer, the main Scryer himself, had taken one of their members to be his new advocate as well as protege, and then of course the parts on that too. They just recently returned, and we start getting members here right now in the current Amazing Spider-Man, as we've seen the cult of the Scryer actually return, who wants revenge on Norman Osborn for destroying the cult and kind of getting it messed up on a few other things. So it's been really interesting how they've not really been talked about in several years, and they're actually making some nice progress here, which I have to say Joe Kelly actually did a good job doing that thing. Critiques, I always thought they were a very interesting character. I think the origins of being kind of a cult made a little bit more, and I think and I read a lot of JM's work on Silver Surfer back in the late 90s, so I really did like how the origins of Scryer and what he did and how the cult came about, and of course course, even the split that happened between the true believers of Scryer, who had been chosen, and of course the cult of the Green Goblin, which Norman Osborn had taken up, and of course how they want revenge on what had happened, because the cult of the Green Goblin was pretty much taken over by Phil Urich when he became the Goblin Queen / Goblin Knight, and of course they kind of fell apart in the pages of the Red Goblin mini series, I should say, with Normie Osborn. And they've recently made a part here with the new Goblin Slayers as Norman Osborn as, you know, the current Spider-Man, why Peter's in space right now with the pieces of them, and actually going back to issue 1 where he was attacked by the cyborg. So there's been quite a very interesting things here that Joe Kelly is kind of coming. I'm actually kind of interested to see where this is going, if we're going to really see a rebirth of the cult of Scryer, even the main Scryer himself, especially with everything they've done with Hellgate and some of the cosmic pieces in Amazing Spider-Man, which is actually interesting too. But I kind of like to see the Scryers being used a little bit more, and after a long time, really kind of just been left out in limbo and everything. So very interesting characters. I think the cult works real good, but I think I really like the cosmic peen of that with the main Scryer. But I really would like to know what he's been up to. I mean, we really haven't seen the character in over 23 years if you really think about it too, and he's was kind of being pushed in as an old big bad cosmic character in the Marvel universe that then kind of got left alone. We haven't really talked or thought much about him in, like I said, over 20 years. So it's really kind of a cool thing here looking at, but they have quite an interesting history from this too, despite their strange origins and then reestablishing them in the main book. And they've kind of been that kind of background characters too. I mean, we really haven't seen Judas Traveler since the Clone Conspiracy under Dan Slott, and the Scriers themselves have been kind of been left over. So I'm kind of really interested in what this faction of them is that's on revenge tour for Norman Osborn, which makes sense. The motivation makes sense after everything that's happened with his character, and of course how the cult of the Green Goblin kind of destroyed that, and how Norman kind of violently took over the Scryers, and then the ones that separated from Norman after he made him the cult of the Green Goblin, and the real Scryer coming back and actually kind of putting them a little bit back under what they were supposed to be. So it's kind of interesting to see what they're going to do, and with this storyline, it's one of the few subplots going on right now in the main book that I've really been enjoying, and I'm kind of glad they're kind of getting into it, and I'm hoping we find out a little bit more about, especially their call, which is even Monsters Fall. So um, it's really kind of cool, and I'm kind of glad they've been kind of brought back. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where they do in the main Amazing Spider-Man, and how they're connected actually to the Hobgoblin right now, as they've been working with Kingsley over his current plan, which we don't know what his current plan is, but that's been a nice little background. So looking forward to seeing what that is too. So I'm much else to say there, guys. I hope everybody has a good holiday weekend here by the time this posts and everything else. I'll be back in December with another Rogues Reviews over actually a personal favorite of mine, who's actually made a pretty cool appearance both in the main books and in the Ultimate Universe here in December to wrap up 2025. So, guys, on more of that, think of liking and subscribing. Please think of sharing, and I'll talk to everybody later.